Now, I hope you remember that this morning I was trying, in the brief space of 50 minutes, to give you a basic introduction to Mahayana Buddhism, the kind of Buddhism that is found in China and Japan, and the kind of Buddhism of which Zen Buddhism in particular is a subsect. And we are rather particularly concerned with Zen, since it has had such a fundamental influence in the shaping of Japanese culture and the arts of Japan, and since we are, in the course of this informal tour, going to be visiting a good deal of Zen monasteries and seeing a great deal of Zen formed works of art, architecture, and so on. So I want to lead now tonight from Buddhism in general, or Mahayana Buddhism in general, to Zen in particular. Now, Zen plays a little game with you. Whenever anybody like myself or Dr. Suzuki talks about Zen, all the other people say, because they talk about it, they don't understand it. Those, in the words of Lao Tzu, who know do not say. Those who say do not know. And yet he said that. He wrote a book of several 80 chapters or so to explain the Tao and the De, its power, and nobody can help themselves. They've got to talk. Human beings are a bunch of chatterboxes. And when we've got something in our minds that we want to talk about, we talk. Now, poetry, though, is the great language, because poetry is the art of saying what can't be said. Every poet knows this. You're trying to describe the indescribable, and every poet also knows that nothing is describable. Whether you take some sort of ineffable mystical experience at one extreme, or whether you take an ordinary rusty nail at the other, nothing is really describable. In the words of the famous Count Korzybski, whatever you say something is, it isn't. We used to have a professor at Northwestern who would produce a match booklet in front of his class and would say to them, "What is it?" And they would say, "Match booklet." He'd say, "No, no, no. Match booklet is a noise. Is this a noise? What is it?" And so to answer this, he'd throw it at them. That's what it is. So in this way, you see, nothing can really be described. And yet, on the other hand, we all know perfectly well what we mean when we talk. If you shared an experience with somebody else, then of course you can talk about it. We can all talk about fire and air and water and wood because we know what it is. And there's no mystery. So in the same way, when it comes to discussing something so esoteric as Zen, it can be discussed. Only, Zen people play games with each other. They play little tricks. They test each other out by saying to somebody, I remember when I met Paul Reps for the first time, who wrote that lovely book, Zen Flesh and Zen Bones. And he said to me, "Well," he said, "you've written quite a number of books by now. You must think you're pretty fancy." I said, "I haven't said a word." This is simply a Zen game. And people sort of feel each other out. There's a poem which says, "When two Zen masters meet each other on the road, they need no introduction. Thieves recognize one another instantaneously." So now, having got that off my chest, it's to say then, if I were to give you a really proper and really and truly educative talk about Zen, I would gather you around here and sit here in silence for 5 minutes and leave. And in a way, this would be a much more direct exposition.
What I think I want to do today is to talk to you about the things which are of major interest to me. Now, the origin of a person who is defined as a philosopher is one who finds that existence itself is exceedingly odd. I mean, we have an opposition between odd and even. And it would be even, let's say flattened out, if nothing existed at all. I mean, it would be so simple. No effort, no trouble, no nothing. But strangely enough, we have the strange conviction that something exists, that we're here, that we're real. And from earliest childhood, that has been an extreme puzzle to me, that just something exists at all. And I discovered the nature of the puzzle. The nature of the puzzle is that I was persuaded by my culture to translate this phenomenon into words or numbers. That I had to represent what is going on in nature in terms of the English language, the French language, the Latin language, the Greek language, and finally the Chinese language. And I found the latter the most suitable. But nevertheless, this is the puzzle. When you want to understand something, when you want to know what is it all about, what you mean is that you need a translation of what is going on into language. And that's the purpose of a university. You're all here studying to translate what is going on in the physical world into words. And even when I say the physical world, that is a purely philosophical conception. It's an idea about the world propagated largely from the 17th, 18th, and 19th centuries of European scientific thought. Physical. We all know what physical is, don't we? I mean, it's material. And what does the word material mean? Well, of course, it's the same word as mother, Latin mater. Greek, metir. Also, meter, measure. And finally, Sanskrit, matra, which also means to measure, and is the root word behind maya, which is illusion. So, the physicists, finally abandoned the quest for finding out what matter is, because they found out that when they investigated matter, they had to describe it in terms of form. And they found out, they just gave it up. In other words, the idea that there was some kind of basic stuff underlying everything was nothing more than an illusion. Because the strict, precise physicist describes structure. And he finds that matter is, after all, only a matter of form. It's only the form that matters. Wowee. Now, we've all been brought up in the common sense of the 19th century. This is the background. This is the unconscious belief system underlying most of our judgments. And that is, well, we had two belief systems, you see. We had, first of all, the Christian or the Jewish, in which there was Big Daddy up the top of the sky. Now, I don't want to offend anybody, but there are probably some of you here who have studied St. Thomas Aquinas and have a very, very profound, deep conception of the Christian God. Or you may have studied Kabbalah or Hasidic Judaism and have a very deep realization that goes beyond Big Daddy. But